So today we're going to show you a color melt technique working with color graphics lacquers. We're going to be working with our red and our violet, and we have our two colors in our bowl here. And then we started by sectioning off a circular section in the center at the high point of the head. So at the arch bevel or the high point where you put a comb, that's where we're going to circle it off. And we're going to make it look like daisy petals. So this would be like the yellow part of the daisy, and then we're going to take crescent sections, and then we will work within the crescent sections as we'll be applying our melt technique. And depending on density of hair is how much you will be taking your section. So I'm just going to take a medium-sized piece working in that crescent type of a section. And we're doing a wet-on-wet technique. So we did her base color with matrix color inside her. And now we're going to go through and put our melt color throughout. So we start in the center, and you apply your lighter color in the center. And now we're going to go through the outsides and put our deeper color, heavily saturating the perimeter first. And then we're going to melt or blur the two sections together. So once I have the outside heavily saturated, I start to kind of feather or dry brush in. And then when these two colors touch or melt together, they're going to combine to create a third color. And you just really want to keep working and blending until they mesh together. So our exterior part, or the edges, are going to be violet. Our center section, where they're starting to melt, will create a red-violet. And then the center will be our pure red. So we're going to actually have three tones infusing and melting together here. And the inspiration came from a mood board that I created, which we'll show you later. And the mood board was designed on molten metal. So the exterior parts tend to be a little bit cooler, or if you think of lava from a volcano, you're going to get those cooler, darker areas along the perimeter, and you're going to get more vibrant areas towards the center where it's hotter. So that's where we came up with this technique for the color melt. And we're just going to put a couple slices to fill in that section, and we'll work in a radial pattern around the center flower. So center again, exterior dark, and then that melt or that marrying of the two colors together, which just gives you that beautiful blend. And this is a little different than what we've seen before. Usually you see it more like a blocking or striping. This is using a vertical pattern to create that really nice look. And you know, the inspiration was beautiful, seeing that dark color along the edges and then the vibrant fire coming through the middle. So I'm going to continue around in a pattern across the top, probably putting in about 3 or 4 sections. I really don't need too many in the back section. It's more just going to be a little flash of color coming through the front. And once I've completed my foil sections, I am going to go in between with some demi-permanent color just to add a little bit more shine to the links and ends to balance that out. Thank you, and we'll come back in a little bit with some more details. Alright, so we've finished the undercut part of our creative cut and color, and we're going to move on to the top section. So I've released everything in the crown and the fringe regions above the parietal ridge. And I'm going to start working with my favorite product in the world, which is Turbo Dryer. And that's going to help go in with a micro oil that's going to help disperse the water and help it more evenly dry and save us up to 50% in time. So I always love to work with Turbo Dryer when I'm doing my styling, just a little bit of evenly misted through the hair. And then Linda has coarser, thicker hair, so it needs that moisture and that suppleness, but she also likes to have a little bit of root lift. So I'm going to work with Volume Rose, and I'm going to work with the volume moves from that range. Just a tiny little bit will do. Evenly emulsify through your hands and start through the lengths and ends, and then gently work up through the strand towards the scalp. And then even emulsify a little bit of that product onto your undercut through the underneath. And then we'll be working with a classic Deadman brush as we work through. Emulsify your product evenly through the hair with your brush. Scalp towards the ends. And we're going to work in a moving type section. So we're going to blow dry everything back, we're going to blow dry everything forward, so that way the roots will get that direction of lift and the ends will stay super smooth. So as we blow dry with the nozzle on our blower, we're going to work everything all the way through the ends. We're going to follow that head shape all the way through, using the head as a roller. That's going to give us that perfect bevel or the smoothness. Once we complete through that, then you can go through and just polish and smooth just a little bit more. And when we're working on the underneath sections, the same thing. We're just going to do a flat wrap technique where we push the hair back and forth to let it fall in its natural place. We're not working on styling or creating a look. We're working on getting a natural shape and movement through the hair so we can continue and go through and do some of our dry cutting techniques. All right, we've completed our blow dry, and it's awesome that you can just see this beautiful little veiling of color starting to come through. So right here you can see the little highs and lows of our color melt from our inspiration of molten metal. So you can see where there's the red, the violet, and then the RV tone tends to melt together on top. And Linda has really thick hair, so if you do traditional highlights or foils, you tend to get like stripes or chunks, where this color melt technique just gives you that beautiful shine and just the glimmers and flickers of the tones coming through the hair. So it looks really natural, really soft. It's a great technique. So again, we took our veil circle at the top, and then we put little petal pieces, and then we worked through them with our two different tones and vertically melted them together. Looks great. And now we're going to move forward with our cutting segment. So we're going to start in the top crown region, and Linda had shared with me sometimes when the layers are too short here it tends to pop up or get like a calic. So we're going to use the existing layer that's there as a guide in this case. And we're going to go through and do a carving technique where we're opening and closing our shear and walking off through the ends. So we start out more parallel to the floor, like the lines on the road, the yellow lines. So we want the floor and our scissor to be parallel. And then as we walk around, we're going to dive down in, and we're going to continue to open and close our scissor the whole time. We're not slide cutting or pulling. We're actually talking or walking our shear through. So we start out flat parallel, and then we dive and carve down. And that's going to create a soft layer through the sides here and give us a lot of movement without seeing a line or a layer in the hair as a traditional haircut would. So for thick hair like this, it's going to give us a ton of movement and just take out some of that bulk and give us a lot of shine in the hair because we're not dragging on the cuticle. So once we walk around those sections, if you want to keep more length through the front, we will become stationary at the top of the ear. So everything will come back to that top of the ear section. And again, using that guide at the top and then walking or diving down to carve off that and create those internal movement of those layers. And then we'll duplicate on the other side. So traveling guide around the back, pie-shaped sections, stationary guide, everything coming back to that point. And then you can freeform detail in for your fringe if you want that to be shorter or longer. And then once you've completed your layers, you'll come in and you'll strengthen up your line and your detail. So you can see where from over directing it's kept length there. So if we wanted to sharpen that a little bit, that's where we can come in and do our point cutting techniques to work on that. A great tip that I like to do when you're point cutting is to rest on your hand here so you can be a Vulcan like Spock. Hold the hair between your pointer finger and your middle finger and rest your shear on your ring finger and close as you slide out, and always stopping when you hit that second knuckle so you won't catch yourself here, and you always will comfortably know where the hair is. By using your fingers you're going to get slight elevation, so just know that's going to create a little bit movement or texture in the hair. If you want to have it closer to zero, we can come in and use comb control and keep it much tighter as we're working. Another great tip is when you're working with point cutting, if we cut in one direction, we're going to create triangles leaning in a certain direction. We want it to look more like a picket fence. So we want to cut in one direction and then come back on the opposite angle and gently soften those triangles so they're points of a picket fence to give us movement rather than being a directional push of a triangle only going in one direction, giving us a weird flip or calic. So it's going to be a beautiful way to softly blend in that line, and then we can go in and detail out our undercut and just make some beautiful softness going through there. So that would be the idea between our creative cut and color so they can work in harmony, and some great techniques to use with an undercut to still have a beautiful classic look with a modern twist to it. Okay, so we're just finishing off with the styling now. So we're going to take diagonal sections, work through with an iron, gently clutch or open and close, and then follow through. So when you go through with your iron, you want to follow the head shape as you go. So it's going to create a beautiful bevel and shine, but it's not going to actually put a bend or a bump in the hair. As we worked through with our cut, we took a little bit of this center veil and brought it over here when we did our carve cutting, and then brought it back the other way. So that way the whole top is going to be completely seamless as we work through the hair. And you can see that little bit of those colors are peeking through, that we did those slice highlights in there. And that's going to be our finished look of our creative cut and our undercut through the underneath there. Very soft, very delicate, and then it helps to collapse in and let the hair fall over. And at a glance, you wouldn't know that it was anything different than a beautiful soft bob. And then when you lift it up underneath, you can see that beautiful modern undercut coming through. Here's the mood board that I was able to create, and the ideas that I found here were molten metal and lava. And I loved how it had the vibrant color in the center and the darker colors towards the edges where the metal or the lava had cooled. You can see there's the darker colors around the perimeter and the vibrant colors in the center. I also found a hair picture that was reminiscent of that. And this is what I used for the inspiration when I was doing Linda's hair, of having the vibrancy. And by using the color melt technique, I did it more vertical to be able to capture that. The one here in the lower corner is the one I really like the most, how it has the violety, cool metallic tones with the still having the warm amber tones of the fire in the center, and then the different pictures of the metal in there. So this is my mood board that I used for the creative cut and color inspiration when I was doing Linda's hair.